It was snowing the night my brother humiliated me in front of our entire family. The kind of snow that glows blue under the mansion lights, soft and silent, like it doesn't want to witness what's about to happen. I remember the silverware clinking, the faint crackle of the fireplace, and Lucas Caswell's voice, smooth, confident, cruel. "Careful with the silver trays, Isla. Wouldn't want the help to drop anything." The laughter came like a wave, first from his wife Vanessa, then from our mother Diana, and finally from the guests who didn't know better. It rolled through the dining hall, bouncing off chandeliers worth more than I'd earned in the last year. I froze a bottle of Merlot in one hand, a napkin folded perfectly in the other. I should have been used to it by now. The jokes, the sideways glances, the reminders that I didn't belong at my own family's Christmas table. But that night something different burned beneath my skin. They thought I was invisible. They were wrong. Lucas leaned back in his chair, wineglass balanced between two manicured fingers, eyes glinting with arrogance. "You know, Mom, it's funny," he continued. "Some people go to college, others go to serve tables. At least Isla's found her calling." Vanessa laughed again, that perfect nasal laugh she'd mastered at charity galas. "Oh, Lucas, don't tease her. Everyone contributes in their own little way. Even waitressing, I suppose, counts as service." I forced a smile, the same one I'd practiced for months working in the cafe downtown. A smile that hid fury behind politeness. I could smell the rosemary roast, the truffle butter, the overpriced wine luxury layered over rot. My father, Charles Caswell, said nothing. He sat at the head of the table, eyes glazed, the patriarch pretending not to hear. He'd perfected selective silence years ago, back when I stopped being useful to his company. "Would you like more wine, sir?" I asked Lucas, my voice steady. He smirked. "Sure, waitress. Just don't spill it on my suit. It's Armani." The laughter swelled again, and I felt something inside me splinter. For years I'd told myself their cruelty didn't matter, that peace meant walking away. But that night, under the glittering chandeliers of Caswell Manor, I realized peace was just a polite word for surrender. The butler cleared his throat awkwardly. "Miss Miss Caswell, perhaps you should take a break." "No," I said, setting down the bottle with precision. "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. I was calculating. Because if Lucas had looked closer, if any of them had, he might have noticed the faint blue light on my phone screen reflected in the wine bottle. The notification that had come through only minutes earlier. Forbes magazine. Vantage Tech founder, the youngest self-made billionaire in America. They didn't know yet. They didn't know that Vantage Tech was mine, that the company redefined data security across DeFi markets. The startup the press couldn't stop talking about, the CEO, whose identity was about to be revealed on Christmas Eve, was me. The irony tasted sweeter than any champagne on that table. I looked at my brother, at his perfect life built on inheritance and manipulation, and whispered quietly, "Enjoy the show." A year earlier, I'd been sitting in a cold Brooklyn apartment, my laptop balanced on two stacked pizza boxes, trying to convince a single investor that my prototype could change the future of digital trust. My name, Caswell, had opened doors once. Now it is closed. Every tech firm in New York knew I'd been blacklisted by my father after refusing to sign away my shares in Caswell Holdings. Families should stay in their lane, he told me the night he pushed the documents across his mahogany desk. "You were never built for business." He was wrong. I wasn't just built for it. I was born in it. When I walked out that night, I had $37 in my checking account, a second-hand laptop, and a fury so focused it could burn marble. I waited tables at dawn, coded at night, lived off instant coffee and exhaustion. And every time I heard someone call my name at the Cafe Isla table, "Four needs water," I whispered to myself, "Keep going." Because I wasn't just waiting tables. I was building something they'd never see coming. Now, standing in that glittering dining room surrounded by the family that had exiled me, I watched as Lucas gestured for another round of laughter. "You know, Mom," he said, swirling his wine, "I read somewhere that every billionaire starts somewhere. Maybe Isla's just working her way up from the kitchen." "Oh, please," Diana sighed, waving a jeweled hand. "Let's not talk business tonight. It's Christmas. Though, Isla dear, I do hope you've found stability." People your age should have retirement plans. Don't worry, I said, smiling thinly. I've invested wisely. It was true. My shares were rising by the hour. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Adam standing by the door, half hidden among the catering staff. He lifted an eyebrow. I gave the smallest nod. The timer had started. I placed the last dish of roasted duck on the table and turned to leave, but Lucas called after me. Hey, waitress, don't forget to tip yourself on the way out. That was the moment my heart went quiet. Not angry, not broken, just silent. Because I finally understood the difference between losing and waiting. Losing meant it was over. Waiting meant the story hadn't finished yet. And maybe I thought, as the laughter blurred into a dull hum, maybe 5 minutes was all it ever took to change a life. By the time dessert arrived, the snow had thickened outside, wrapping the mansion in ghostly white. The guests chatted about market crashes and vacation homes, oblivious to the tremor that was about to rip through their perfect little world. Lucas's phone buzzed first, then Vanessa's, then Diana's. I was halfway across the room when I heard the first gasp. Oh my God. A pause. The sound of a chair scraping the floor. Lucas, someone whispered, "Look at this." The room went still. Only the crackle of the fire dared to move. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could hear the rustle of expensive fabrics, the shuffling of panic as screens lit up one by one. Forbes, Vantage Tech founder. Isla Caswell, 27, becomes the youngest self-made female billionaire in America. No one spoke for a full 10 seconds. Then, like the slow collapse of a snow-laden branch, everything broke. Vanessa's glass slipped from her hand, shattering across the marble. Lucas's face was drained of color. My father looked up at the headline glowing on every phone, every tablet, every TV mounted on the wall. And I turned, finally meeting his eyes. "I told you," I said quietly, voice steady, "I've been investing wisely." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was historic. Outside, the snow kept falling soft and relentless. Inside, the Caswell empire had just cracked. And me? I just smiled, adjusted my apron, and whispered under my breath, "Merry Christmas." Because for the first time in my life, the girl they'd laughed at wasn't serving dinner. She was serving justice. I was 22 the night my father erased me from his company. It wasn't sudden, it was surgical. Cold, clean. The kind of betrayal that wears a tie and calls itself a business decision. He'd summoned me to his office at Caswell Holdings, the 42nd floor overlooking Midtown, where snow fell between the skyscrapers like slow ash. The air smelled like power cedarwood, old money, and something sterile beneath it. "Sit down, Isla," he said, not looking up from his monitor. I did, my hands pressed against my knees to keep them from shaking. On his desk sat a stack of papers, the top one stamped in gold: transfer of shares. Immediate execution required. "You've been working hard," he said, finally glancing at me. "I know that. You built the data division from nothing. But it's time to think strategically. Your brother's ready to take the reins, and the board needs clarity. Family loyalty. First right?" The words slid over me like ice water. "You're asking me to give up my shares." "I'm not asking," he said, his tone soft but absolute. "You'll still be part of the family, Isla. Just not the company." Lucas leaned against the window arms, crossed, smirking like he'd already won. "Don't look so shocked, sis. You're not really a business person. You're an engineer. You like the tech stuff. Leave the real work to us." I laughed, but it came out wrong. "The real work, I've spent 3 years building the infrastructure that keeps your company from collapsing every time someone forgets how to back up a file." Father sighed. "This isn't about skill. It's about perception. Investors don't trust women in technical leadership. It's not fair, but it's the market. The market. That invisible deity he worshipped more than family morality or truth. So you'd rather cut me out than face a few sexist investors?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pushed the papers toward me, a Mont Blanc pen balanced on top. "Sign tonight, Isla. We'll transfer the shares quietly. You'll receive a settlement. $500,000. You can start something of your own. Maybe a cafe or whatever it is you do now. $500,000 for my legacy. I stood my heart hammering. No. Lucas's smile faltered. You're making a mistake. I looked between them, the father who'd built an empire on other people's brilliance and the son who'd inherited both his money and his arrogance. Maybe, I said. But at least it'll be my mistake. When I left that office, I knew I'd never step foot in Caswell Holdings again. What I didn't know yet was that my father would make sure the rest of the world closed its doors too. The blacklisting began 2 weeks later. I applied for a position at Horizon Data Systems, rejected before the interview. Then at Helix Tech, where a recruiter accidentally forwarded me an internal email. Isla Caswell, former Caswell Holdings executive. Rumor says she left after breaching NDAs. Risk not worth taking. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Breaching NDAs. A lie crafted with surgical precision. My father didn't just remove me from his company, he scrubbed me from credibility itself. I called him once from a payphone near Union Square. He didn't pick up. Instead, his assistant left a voicemail an hour later. Mr. Caswell appreciates your passion, but requests you stop contacting him about corporate matters. He wishes you well. Wishes me well. I spent Christmas that year alone in a sublet apartment in Queens, my bank balance shrinking and my pride already gone. The heat barely worked, and the walls smelled like someone else's cigarettes. But I had something no one could take, my code. Every night after work, washing dishes at a late-night diner, I came home and wrote. Lines of Python strings of encrypted logic. I was building something I couldn't quite name yet. A way to track and authenticate financial transactions without human interference. Transparent. Secure. Unbreakable. Something that would make companies like Caswell obsolete. I didn't tell anyone. Not until a stranger with tired eyes and a Harvard sweatshirt sat at the diner counter one night and ordered coffee. You the owner, he'd asked. I laughed. If I were, I'd serve better pie. He smiled faintly, scanning the tablet I used to calculate tips. You coded this POS system yourself, I froze. How did you... The encryption. It's elegant. Not something a waitress just picks up. I hesitated. Who are you? He extended his hand. Adam Marlowe. Venture investor. Mostly early-stage startups. What are you building? I wanted to lie, but exhaustion had stripped away my caution. A decentralized financial verification engine. Real-time cross-ledger authentication for smart contracts. He blinked, surprised. You mean, like a blockchain-based trust protocol? Exactly. He stirred his coffee slowly. Does it work? Mostly. Needs funding for server access. How much? 20,000. He smiled, half amused, half impressed. You're ambitious. I'm desperate, I said quietly. He took a sip, then nodded. I'll invest 30, but I want 20%. I shook his hand before he could change his mind. That was how Vantage Technologies was born, between a cracked countertop and a cup of burned diner coffee. The months that followed were chaos and caffeine. I worked shifts until dawn, coded through the day, and slept in 30-minute bursts. Adam helped where he could, introducing me to contacts negotiating small grants. But it was my code that turned heads. 6 months later, a small blog called Tech Pulse Weekly ran a piece, Unknown Startup Disrupts Transaction Security, Vantage Technologies, raises $2.8 million seed round. I read the article in the back room of the diner, still wearing my apron. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Not because I was proud, but because it was the first time in years someone had written about my work without attaching my father's name. That night I walked out of the diner for the last time. My manager asked if I'd come back for the holiday rush. I told him I had other plans. The first office of Vantage Tech wasn't really an office. It was a one-bedroom apartment in Williamsburg, with Ethernet cables snaking across the floor and a mattress shoved against the wall to make space for servers. I hired 3 engineers from a freelancer forum. 2 of them quit within a week. The third, Priya Patel, stayed. She said, "You're crazy, but I like that in a founder." By autumn, Vantage had its first client, a mid-sized bank in Seattle, desperate for security solutions after a breach. We patched their entire network in 48 hours. The next week, 5 more companies called. Then 10. Adam came by one night with takeout and 2 bottles of cheap champagne. You realize you're doing what half of Silicon Valley failed to do, I laughed, exhausted. I just don't want to be invisible anymore. He raised his glass. Then stop hiding. Let people know who built this. But I shook my head. Not yet. Because I wasn't ready. Not until the right moment. Not until the world would look at the Caswells and see me instead. The day Forbes called, I almost didn't answer. Ms. Marlowe, a woman's voice said, this is Isla. Who's calling? Jennifer Cross, Forbes Technology. We've been following Vantage Technology's growth. You've disrupted 3 major sectors in under a year. Our editors are preparing a cover story on emerging tech founders. Would you be open to an interview? My throat went dry. You want to feature me? She laughed. You, Ms. Caswell, are the story. For a long time after the call, I just sat there staring at my reflection in the dark monitor. The girl who'd been told she wasn't built for business. The daughter was erased from her father's company. The waitress mocked at Christmas dinner. The forgotten heir. Not anymore. Because I wasn't just building a company. I was building proof. And soon, very soon, the people who'd thrown me away would see exactly what they'd created. The cafe on Bedford Avenue smelled like espresso and rain-soaked wool. It wasn't glamorous peeling wallpaper, humming refrigerators, and a bell over the door that jangled every time a gust of winter air slipped in. But to me, it was a sanctuary. Between the morning rush and the late afternoon lull, it was where I disappeared into my double life, barista by day, founder by night. Hey, Isla, my manager Raina called from the counter. Can you cover table 6? Guy spilled his latte again. On it, I said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear and grabbing a rag. The man smiled sheepishly as I wiped up the mess. Sorry, guess I'm all thumbs before my second cup. No worries, I said, voice automatic, polite. My mind was already elsewhere on the lines of code waiting in my laptop upstairs on the server migration Adam had promised to set up on the endless loop of progress and exhaustion that had become my life. He left a $1 tip. I smiled anyway. Every dollar helped. When the lunch rush faded, I slipped into the back room, locking the door behind me. My laptop glowed in the dim light, its hum steadier than my heartbeat. I opened the terminal window, fingers flying. Vantage Protocol 1.9. Commit successful. It was happening. My creation, a trustless verification layer that authenticated data transfers in under a second, was no longer a dream. The lines of code that filled my screen were the architecture of rebellion itself. For months, I'd hidden behind an alias, Marlowe. The tech world didn't know that the mysterious coder revolutionizing decentralized finance was a woman, or that she carried the last name Caswell. And that anonymity was power. Because every headline about Vantage Technologies was a strike against the family that said I couldn't do it. Adam called around 2. You sound tired, he said. I am tired, I admitted, glancing at the clock. But the protocol's stable. We're ready for beta. Good. Because I've set up a meeting for tomorrow with Haven Capital. I froze. Haven was one of the most aggressive venture groups in New York. They'll never fund us, I said. Not if they find out who I am. They won't, he said simply. Let me handle that. Just show them what you've built. I closed my eyes, picturing my father's office, the sleek table, the walls lined with framed stock certificates, the photo of him shaking hands with the governor. He'd once told me, in this world, perception is worth more than innovation. Tomorrow, I was going to prove him wrong. The next morning, I traded my apron for a thrift store blazer and caught the subway to Midtown. The Haven Capital office towered over the street like a cathedral to capitalism glass chrome and the smell of fear disguised as ambition. Adam was already waiting in the lobby, calm as ever in his navy coat. Are you ready? He asked. No, I said honestly. He grinned. Perfect. That means you still care. Inside the conference room, 2 men in suits and 1 woman with sharp eyes waited, their expressions skeptical before I'd even spoken. The woman, Madison Lee, glanced at the deck in front of her. Vantage Technologies, she said, reading aloud. You claim to have solved verification latency across decentralized ledgers. That's bold, I smiled. It's not a claim. It's a demonstration. I connected my laptop to the screen. The numbers appeared data packets streaming in real-time transactions verified in under 0.8 seconds. Madison leaned forward. What's the failure rate? 0.02%, I said. And falling. Server dependency minimal. Our codebase can deploy on public, private, or hybrid infrastructure. One of the men interrupted. And what makes you think anyone will trust a no-name startup with this kind of data? I met his gaze. Because trust is all we have left when institutions fail. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Madison sat back, tapping her pen. We'll send a term sheet by Friday. I nodded, holding my breath until the elevator doors closed behind us. Adam exhaled first. You did it. I think we did, I said softly. He grinned. You realize this puts us in the same sandbox as your family's company. I know, I said, watching the city blur past the glass. And I hope they choke on the sand. 2 months later, Forbes Tech Weekly published its first feature on Vantage, the silent architect of the blockchain revolution. They called me the invisible disruptor. They didn't know how right they were. Our small team, me, Ethan, and Priya, worked out of a converted loft in Greenpoint. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and we powered our servers off extension cords that hummed like angry bees, but it was ours. Some nights I'd stand by the window watching the Manhattan skyline in the distance. The Caswell building glowed there, my father's empire built on control. I wondered if he had any idea that the daughter he'd erased was building something that could destroy his foundation. Why don't you tell them who you are? Priya asked one night, pushing a box of takeout noodles toward me. Because the name Caswell doesn't open doors, it locks them, I said. Maybe it's time to unlock one, she said quietly. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. By spring, Vantage was everywhere, mentioned on investor podcasts, dissected in Reddit threads, whispered about in boardrooms. Our valuation hit 100 million, then 2. Every success felt like vindication, but also like pressure pressing against my ribs. The bigger we grew, the harder it became to hide. The first crack appeared when an old classmate from MIT reached out. Isla, holy crap, it's you, isn't it? I saw your code at a demo. That's your signature encryption pattern. I didn't answer. I deleted the message. But I knew then that my anonymity had an expiration date. The real breaking point came in June when Haven Capital arranged a closed-door summit for its top portfolio CEOs. The event was held at a luxury resort in Connecticut, all marble floors and imported orchids. I wasn't supposed to attend publicly, but Adam insisted. You've earned this, he said. Stop hiding behind initials. So I went. Halfway through the keynote session, I saw him, Lucas Caswell, sitting 3 rows ahead. My breath caught. He was older, sharper, wearing the same arrogance as a tailored suit. Caswell Holdings was co-sponsoring the event. He didn't see me. Not yet. When the networking dinner began, I stayed near the back, watching. He bragged to anyone who would listen about market dominance, about out-innovating startups, about the Caswell name. Adam noticed my clenched jaw. You okay? I'm fine. I lied. But I wasn't. Because hearing him take credit for technology I'd pioneered years earlier made my vision blur. He was bragging about a trustless authentication patent his company had filed a version of my early prototype. My work. I stepped forward, ready to confront him. Adam caught my arm. Not here. Not yet. He was right. Timing mattered, and I knew exactly when the world would finally learn who I was. When we returned to the city, I spent all night coding. The room filled with the quiet rhythm of keys clicking, fans, whirring, heart-pounding. On my screen, I queued a new project, Vantage Public Release 2.0. The next phase wasn't just about technology. It was about exposure, proof, identity. My plan was simple. By Christmas, I'd announce my name, the real one, on the global stage. Not as a waitress, not as a fallen Caswell, but as the architect behind a company that had already eclipsed everything my family had built. I'd been silent long enough. The world was about to hear me. And when they did, the first echo would reach the mansion in the Hamptons, the place where Lucas Caswell once told me I'd never amount to more than a girl with a tray. This time I wouldn't be serving him wine. I'd be serving his reckoning. The night Vantage Technologies went live. Brooklyn was silent except for the hum of our servers. The old warehouse we'd converted into an office still smelled like sawdust and ambition. Priya was cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by cables, a can of Red Bull balanced dangerously on her knee. Adam stood near the window phone in hand, watching the city glow like a circuit board. Final check? I said, my voice steady but my palms slick. Server nodes connected, triple confirmed, Priya said. East Coast, West Coast, and Singapore are synced. Failover redundancy is at 100%. Press release scheduled. Adam nodded. Goes out at midnight. Headlines tomorrow. The Ghost Company challenging Wall Street. You're sure you want to stay anonymous? I hesitated, my hand hovering over the keyboard. Not forever. Just until they can't stop me anymore. Then let's make history, he said. I pressed enter, the server's word. The lights flickered once. Then the status monitor turned green. Vantage Technologies online. No fireworks, no applause. Just a hum. The sound of something beginning. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath for hours. That's it, Priya said, smiling. You just changed the way finance works. I laughed, half in disbelief. Then why does it still feel like we're one power outage away from ruin? Adam clinked his coffee mug against mine. Because that's how revolutions start, quietly. The next morning, the headlines exploded. Tech radar: unknown startup Vantage disrupts verification infrastructure. Bloomberg: Wall Street's new threat comes from Brooklyn. Reddit: is Vantage the real deal or another crypto mirage? Within 48 hours, we had calls from hedge funds, banks, and venture firms who'd once refused to even read my name on a resume. The irony was delicious and exhausting. Another term sheet from Stratacore, Adam said, tossing a folder onto my desk. They want 10% for $5 million. Tell them no, I said, scanning through an email from a Fortune 500 executive asking for a private demo. Priya raised an eyebrow. You just turned down $5 million. Money's not the problem, I said. Control is. She smiled. You sound like someone who's been burned before. Maybe I have. What I didn't tell her was that Caswell Holdings, the company that used to be mine, had reached out too. A message from their corporate account. We'd like to discuss potential collaboration. I deleted it without responding. By October, we'd moved into a real office in Soho. 3 glass walls, 1 coffee machine that actually worked, and the kind of sunlight that made ambition look cinematic. Reporters started camping outside the building, trying to guess who the mysterious founder was. They called me the Phantom of Finance. It would have been flattering if it didn't make me nauseous. Isla CNBC wants an interview, Adam said one afternoon. They'll disguise your voice if you want. You could use this moment. I shook my head. Not yet. The tech should speak first. He sighed. You realize this mystery can't last forever. I know. I paused, glancing at the skyline beyond the glass. But when I finally show my face, I want it to be somewhere they can't look away. In November, Vantage secured its biggest contract, yet a multi-billion-dollar data integrity deal with an international finance consortium. It was the kind of partnership that could cement our status permanently. But success came with shadows. Late one night, while checking network logs, I noticed an access attempt failed but precise. Someone had tried to mirror our private architecture using old credentials tied to an internal Caswell Holdings server. My stomach turned cold. Someone's probing our systems, I told Ethan, forwarding the alert. They're using Caswell IPs. He frowned. You think it's them? Who else would know what to look for? We locked down every node, updated encryption layers, and rerouted data through decoy servers. But I knew that style. It was Lucas, or one of his engineers. My family had found me, even if they didn't know what they were looking at yet. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Lucas's smirk the way he'd laughed at Christmas 2 years ago. I imagined him reading headlines about Vantage, about the invisible founder, and feeling the itch of suspicion. He was too proud to admit he'd been wrong, but too curious not to investigate. Good. Let him look. Let him wonder. Because when he finally discovered the truth, it would be far too late to stop me. Thanksgiving came and went. The team insisted on celebrating in the office, paper plates, string lights, laughter echoing off the glass walls. For the first time in years, I wasn't lonely on a holiday. Priya raised a toast with sparkling cider. To Isla, or whoever you are today, you built something out of nothing. That's magic. Adam clinked his glass. To the waitress, who became a ghost. I laughed. Don't start calling me that. It sounds like I died. You didn't, he said softly. You came back to life. His words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. We cleaned up after midnight, and as the others left, Adam lingered. Do you ever think about what comes next? He asked. After this, after revenge, he said, his voice low. I looked at him, unsure how to answer. I haven't gotten there yet. He nodded slowly, like he understood. Then I'll be here when you do. December arrived wrapped in frost and adrenaline. Our valuation had crossed 500 million. Forbes had reached out again, this time more insistent. They wanted to feature Vantage in their Top Innovators of the Year issue. The editor's email ended with one question: we would love to put a face to this revolution. Will you grant us that Adam urged me to accept? Priya said it was destiny. I told them no, at least not yet. Because while the world was celebrating Vantage, I was planning something else, something that would close a circle years in the making. A letter had arrived at my apartment that morning, sealed in gold wax. The handwriting was unmistakable. Caswell Holdings requests your presence at the annual Christmas gala. I turned it over, reading the embossed return address, the Caswell Estate, East Hampton. For a long time, I just stared at it. The same house, the same dinner, the same laughter that once tore me apart. Adam found me at my desk, the envelope still in my hand. What's that? He asked. An invitation, I said quietly. To the past. He frowned. You're not seriously thinking of going? Oh, I am, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. But not as a guest. Isla. Relax, I interrupted. I won't crash their party. I'll just attend in uniform. He stared at me. You're going back as a waitress. Exactly. For the first time in years, the thought made me laugh. Because this time, I wasn't the forgotten heir or the humiliated daughter. I was the architect of their reckoning, dressed in black and white, carrying silver trays and silent justice. Adam shook his head, half horrified, half in awe. You're insane. Maybe, I said, sliding the invitation into my pocket. But even insanity has a dress code. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and slow, blanketing the city in white. The same snow that once witnessed my humiliation was coming back to see the sequel. Only this time, I wouldn't be serving dinner. I'd be serving consequences. The envelope sat on my desk for 2 days before I opened it. Thick cream paper, cedar-scented arrogance, my family in stationery form. I ran my thumb along the golden wax seal, the C that once meant Caswell, once meant mine. When I finally broke it, the words stared back like a dare. The Caswell family requests the honor of your presence at our annual Christmas gala. Formal attire required. For years, that invitation had been my exile notice. Every December, they sent one, knowing I wouldn't dare show my face. This time, I wasn't just attending. I was returning with intent. Adam found me staring at it, coffee in one hand, the envelope in the other. You're not really going, are you? Oh, I'm going, I said. Just not as a guest. He sighed, setting his mug down. You can't waltz into that house after everything that happened. Not yet. Waltz. Please. I'll be carrying trays. He blinked. You're serious. Dead serious, I said. If revenge had a dress code, mine came with an apron. He shook his head. Why? I met his eyes. Because they laughed when I left that house. I want them to see what they laughed at. Adam leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You want revenge? No, I said, sliding the invitation back into its envelope. I want closure. Revenge is just the wrapping paper. 3 weeks later, I drove east toward the Hamptons. The snow was relentless, smearing the world into shades of gray and memory. Every mile felt like a rewind. Every argument, every silent dinner, every dismissal dressed as concern. The Caswell mansion emerged through fog like a ghost that refused to die, 3 stories of stone and glass light spilling from its enormous windows. At the gate, a guard checked the catering list and waved me through. The name I'd used, Isla Moore, blended neatly among the other staff. Inside the ballroom glimmered. Chandeliers hung like constellations, gold ribbons coiled around marble columns, and a grand piano played something festive and soulless in the corner. Guests arrived in diamonds and silk. Their laughter polished, their smiles rehearsed. And me, I wore black and white, the same uniform I'd once worn in a Brooklyn cafe. Except this time, I owned the company that catered the event. "Servers, line up," barked the event manager, a woman in a red blazer who looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Tray up, no eye contact, no interruptions." "Yes, ma'am," I said, falling into line. When I stepped into the dining hall, the world narrowed. The scent of pine and champagne hit first, followed by the sound of a laugh I'd know anywhere. Lucas. He stood near the fireplace, hand at Vanessa's waist, surrounded by people who pretended to like him. His voice carried easily, arrogant and warm. "This year's been exceptional," he was saying. "Caswell Holdings just secured a new blockchain verification contract, revolutionary stuff. Our R&D team's working overtime. Caswell shares are soaring." My fingers tightened around the tray. My R&D team. My algorithm. He had no idea he was bragging about technology built on the skeleton of my original code, the same one he'd stolen the moment I left the company. "Careful with the champagne," Vanessa said as I passed. Her tone was sweet, dismissive. She didn't recognize me. None of them did. Almost disappointing. Almost. I kept my head down, making rounds through the glittering crowd. Faces blurred into noise until I reached the far end near the window overlooking the frozen garden. My father stood there. Charles Caswell, older now, slower, but still carrying that gravitational authority. Beside him, my mother sparkled in emeralds and disinterest. "Charles, a guest, said your son's quite the prodigy. I hear Caswell Holdings is entering the DeFi sector." My father smiled faintly. "Lucas has vision," he said. "It's a family trait." I nearly laughed. As I turned to refill a glass, his gaze brushed over me, brief, indifferent, and moved on. Not a flicker of recognition. Not a shred of regret. Perfect. The better the disguise, the greater the reveal. An hour later, the string quartet shifted from jazz to carols. Dinner was announced. Guests took their seats at the long mahogany table, every setting an echo of my past. I could still see my old chair halfway down where I used to hide behind napkins while Lucas commanded the conversation. "Wine?" I asked softly, stepping behind him now. He didn't look up. "Yes, thank you." I poured slowly the red, swirling through the crystal. He glanced sideways, impatient. "A bit more, please." I poured again, silent. "Thank you," he said curtly, eyes already drifting back to his reflection in the silverware. At the head of the table, my father raised his glass. To family, he said the same hollow toast as every year. To legacy, to success, to the Caswell name. The chorus followed, to the Caswell name. I stared at him thinking, you destroyed it the moment you forgot what it stood for. Across the room, Adam lingered near the entrance, hidden behind a pillar. He wasn't supposed to be here, but of course he'd come. His eyes met mine for a heartbeat, a silent question. "Are you sure?" I nodded once. Then I set the tray down. The timing was perfect. 10 seconds later, the ballroom doors opened again. A photographer and 2 journalists entered, escorted by the PR director. Caswell Holdings was about to announce its new innovation division. Lucas rose smiling, for the camera's confidence rehearsed to muscle memory. "Caswell Holdings," he began, "is entering a new age of digital integrity. We're working with—" The words died in his throat as the photographer's phone buzzed. Then another, then another. A ripple spread through the guests. Someone frowned at his screen. "Wait, is this real?" Lucas turned confused. What? Diana leaned closer, squinting. Lucas, darling, look. Every phone in the room glowed at once. Forbes alert. Vantage Technologies. Founder revealed. Isla Caswell. The youngest self-made female billionaire in America. Silence. Then the collective intake of breath that comes before chaos. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Someone gasped. Vanessa dropped her fork. My father's glass shattered against the marble floor. Lucas's face drained of color as recognition hit like ice water. No, he whispered. No, that's me, I said softly. He spun toward me, disbelief collapsing into awe. Isla. The sound of my name after all these years felt like thunder. Miss Caswell, one of the reporters, stammered, You're here. I smiled, finally meeting their eyes. Just doing my job. Flashbulbs erupted. Cameras clicked. Guests murmured. Lucas's hand trembled around his glass. You planned this. I tilted my head. No, brother. I built this. I turned to the nearest journalist. Tell Forbes I'll grant a comment later. Tonight's about family after all. Then I walked away, the weight of their stares following like smoke. Outside, the snow thickened until the world blurred into silence. Inside, their empire cracked one headline at a time. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't invisible. I was inevitable. The silence after I walked out of that ballroom was almost holy. The air outside was crisp, sharp with ocean salt and pine. My shoes crunched over snow as I crossed the marble steps, each sound a clean punctuation mark. I didn't look back. Not at the house that once defined me. Not at the family whose laughter had cut deeper than any blade. Inside, I knew chaos had taken my place. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already vibrating, notifications, missed calls, journalists, investors, old classmates suddenly remembering my name. Forbes, Bloomberg, Business Insider, all running the same headline, the waitress who built a billion-dollar empire. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sat in the driver's seat, exhaled slowly, and watched the tension bleed from my shoulders. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked different. Calm, older, detached. The kind of calm that comes after surviving your own ruin. The passenger door opened. Adam slid in snow melting in his hair. You okay? I laughed quietly. Define okay. He smiled. You just detonated a decade of family hierarchy. That dinner's going to feed Wall Street gossip for years. Good, I said softly. Let them talk. He studied me for a beat. You didn't do it for the press. No, I said. I did it because they needed to see who they threw away. The next morning, the world woke up to me. Every financial outlet carried my face, my rise, my silence. The internet is split between awe and analysis. Who was she? How did she do it? Partnership offers flooded my inbox. Startups, VCs, even a book deal. At 5 a.m., Priya texted, You broke the internet. Proud of you, boss. By 8, the office buzzed with nervous excitement. The team clustered around the big screen replaying footage from the gala. Look at Lucas's face, Priya said, laughing. That's pure panic. Adam whistled. Caswell Holdings stock is down 12% since last night. I didn't smile. It's not over. Because humiliation was only the beginning. Men like Lucas didn't fall cleanly, they dragged everyone down with them. By noon, I was proven right. My assistant called through, You'll want to see this. On screen, the Caswell Holdings logo glowed behind a row of executives. Lucas sat center jaw tight, performing composure for the cameras. My sister's venture, Vantage Technologies, is an independent entity, he said. We wish her well, though we question the integrity of her methods. My jaw clenched. She was part of Caswell Holdings before departing. Abruptly, he continued. Much of our early research contributed to her current company. We're exploring legal options to ensure intellectual property remains protected. Priya swore softly. He's calling your company a copy. Adam looked at me. We can refute this immediately. No, I said, standing. Let him dig. Both stared at me. The deeper he digs, I said, the more rot he'll expose. Every patent, every line of code carries my signature. Adam exhaled. So we play the long game. The only game worth playing, I said. That night I stayed at the office long after everyone left. The city glowed against falling snow reflections ghosting across the glass. I opened my old files, the ones from Caswell Holdings. Line after line of code scrolled by, each time stamped, each tagged with my name. Proof of ownership, proof of betrayal, proof of survival. Behind me, footsteps. Adam appeared with 2 coffees. You should go home. Sleep. If I go home, I'll think too much. He set a cup beside me. Then think here. Just remember to breathe. I smiled faintly. The last time I saw them terrified was the day they fired me. Lucas laughed, saying, I'd never survive outside their shadow. And now I said, closing the laptop, I'm the one casting it. He studied me quietly. You got what you wanted, Isla. Don't lose yourself chasing the echo. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I was fine, that revenge hadn't changed me, but part of me knew power could become its own kind of cage. 2 days later, Caswell Holdings crashed again. Harder. Major investors pulled out. A leaked document revealed Lucas had inflated quarterly earnings. Whispers of insider trading spread like wildfire. It was poetic justice, and it unsettled me. I hadn't done it. I hadn't leaked anything. So who had, when I asked? Priya and Ethan both denied it. We protect our success, Adam said. We don't sabotage others. Still, something in my gut twisted. Someone else was moving the pieces. That night my phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Caswell. The voice was calm, female familiar. Margaret Lane, former compliance officer at Caswell Holdings. We should talk. About what? About your brother, she said, and how he's been falsifying records for 3 years. I have proof: emails, wire transfers, board memos. He's about to bring the company down. My pulse quickened. Why tell me? Because you're the only one who'll use it properly, she said, and because he tried to destroy you. Call it professional karma. Then she hung up. By morning, the story broke: Caswell Holdings under investigation for fraud and insider trading. Stock fell 20% overnight. The board in an emergency session. Reporters at the gates. My phone buzzed, my father calling. I didn't answer. On screen, Lucas was being escorted from the building, face-pale eyes, hollow cameras flashing like judgment. I waited for triumph to come. It didn't. What arrived instead was quieter, heavier, pity. Because even as he fell, he still believed he was untouchable. That night as I left the office, Adam caught up to me. You did it, he said. The company's collapsing. Your name's cleared. It's done. Is it? I asked. He hesitated. You tell me. I looked out at the skyline, an expanse of glass and ambition. Cities don't care who wins. They only reflect who's left standing. Maybe it's never done, I said quietly. Maybe it just changes shape. He nodded slowly. Then what comes next? I smiled faintly. Next I rebuilt it. Not from spite. From freedom. Outside snow drifted in steady silence. For the first time I realized revenge was never the ending. It was just the door I had to walk through to reach myself again. The Caswell mansion was quiet the day I returned. Not the kind of silence that comes from peace, but the hollow stillness that follows collapse. Snow blanketed the drive, hiding the cracks in the marble steps, where photographers once tripped over themselves to capture a family that no longer existed. The security guard barely looked up as he opened the gate. No recognition, no resistance. The Caswell name no longer carried weight. It carried warning. Inside, the walls seemed to have shrunk. Paintings that once screamed legacy now looked like apologies. The chandelier flickered dimly, the air colder, thinner. I found my father in the study behind the same mahogany desk where he'd once signed my disinheritance papers. He looked 10 years older, though only weeks had passed since Christmas. His posture slumped. Tie loosened, the air of command replaced by disbelief. Isla, he said, my name tumbling out as if he'd forgotten how to use it. Father, He gestured to the chair opposite him. Sit. I stayed standing. You wanted to see me. I didn't have much choice. His hands trembled as he pushed a folder across the desk. Lucas is under federal investigation. They've frozen our accounts, seized the servers. The board has voted to dissolve Caswell Holdings. I looked down at the folder but didn't touch it. That's unfortunate. His mouth tightened. You don't have to enjoy this. I don't, I said. But I won't pretend to mourn what destroyed me. He rubbed his temples, exhaling. Your brother made mistakes, yes. But the company, our family, wasn't always this way. You grew up in these walls. You benefited from that legacy. I smiled faintly. Then you should have thought of that before erasing me from it. His jaw clenched. I wanted to protect the business. No, I said softly. You wanted to protect your pride. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the weak hiss of the fire. Finally he said, The government will take nearly everything. But the estate, the house, the remaining shares the trust. I can transfer those to you. It's not much, but it's what's left. I stared at him. You're giving me the ruins. I'm giving you what should have been yours. It would have sounded noble if it hadn't come so late. Keep it, I said. He blinked. What I don't want your mansion or your stock or the ghosts that live in these walls. I built something of my own. It doesn't reek of arrogance and blood money. He leaned back, studying me. You've changed. I had to. He gave a dry laugh. You sound like your mother. Where is she gone? He said simply. She left the day after the investigation started. Said she was done pretending. That I believed. My mother had always been the quiet casualty of his empire, draped in diamonds, drowning in silence. Lucas. In custody, he whispered. He tried to flee. They caught him at the airport. For a moment I saw it, my brother, wrists in cuffs, reporters shouting his name. The golden heir was reduced to a headline. He'll blame you, I said. He already has. He looked down at his hands. But the truth is, I built a son who thought deceit was strength. That's my legacy. I wanted to hate him. I'd rehearsed that hatred for years, but standing there watching him wilt under the weight of his own making, I felt something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. You can stop building legacies, I said quietly. Start being human instead. He looked at me like he no longer knew how. I didn't stay long. The house felt like a mausoleum, and I'd already buried too many versions of myself there. On the drive back to the city, I rolled down the window and let the winter air sting my skin. Adam called as I crossed the bridge. You okay? I just had coffee with the ghost of capitalism, I said dryly. That bad. He offered me everything he lost. I told him I didn't want it. A pause. You know, most people would have taken it. I'm not most people anymore. He chuckled softly. No, you're not. At the office, the world was moving forward. Vantage thrived. Investors lined up. Journalists asked for exclusives. Our valuation doubled since the Forbes reveal. But I stayed quiet. I didn't post, didn't boast. Something in me had shifted. Revenge had been the fire that fueled me. But fires, if left unchecked, consume everything. One night, Priya found me staring out at the skyline. You look like you're somewhere else, she said. Just thinking. About them, about everything I admitted. I spent so long proving I didn't need them that I forgot what I actually wanted. What do you want now? Peace, I said simply. And maybe purpose. She smiled. Then maybe it's time to build something that isn't about them at all. Her words stuck. 2 weeks later, I made an announcement. Vantage Technologies would launch a philanthropic initiative, the Caswell Foundation for Innovation and Equity, funding young women in tech who came from nothing, just like I once had. Adam raised an eyebrow. Caswell Foundation. It's not for them, I said. It's for me, for the version of me they erased. He grinned. You're turning your name into a weapon for good. Not a weapon, I corrected. A blueprint. The media loved it. Investors applauded. But the real closure came quietly. One morning a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address, only the familiar curve of my mother's handwriting. Isla, I saw the news. I wanted you to know I left your father because of you, not out of shame, but because you reminded me courage still exists. I've taken nothing but my name. It's enough. I'm sorry I didn't defend you when I should have, but I'm proud now in the way mothers dream to be. Be free. Mom. I read it twice, then again, the words softening something in me I hadn't known was still hard. For the first time in years I cried. Not for loss, not for revenge, but for the strange, fragile beauty of survival. A month later, Forbes ran another headline: Vantage founder donates $10 million to Women in Tech Fund. The photo beneath showed me standing among a group of young developers smiling, not the polished corporate smile, but something real. And somewhere out there, I imagined my father seeing it, realizing that the one thing money could never buy was redemption. Because you can't inherit integrity. You have to earn it, even if it means losing everything first. The morning after Forbes announced the Caswell Foundation, I woke to find my name everywhere again, but this time not for vengeance. The headlines called it a redemption arc, a generational reckoning, a billionaire rewriting her own bloodline. I didn't read past the headlines. I didn't need to, because I wasn't doing this for headlines. I was doing it for peace. But peace, I was learning, rarely arrives without ghosts. The first ghost showed up 3 days later, wearing a gray suit and a haunted expression. "Ms. Caswell," my receptionist said, peeking into my office. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." When the door opened, Lucas stood there. He looked nothing like the golden boy of Christmas past. His hair was unkempt, his tie crooked, the sharpness in his eyes dulled by exhaustion. For the first time in my life, my brother looked human and almost small. 5 minutes, I said. He hesitated before stepping inside. The door clicked shut behind him like a sentence being passed. "I didn't know where else to go," he said quietly. "That's new," I replied. "You always had everywhere to go." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said. "But I'll admit it's strange watching you stand in my office instead of the other way around." He looked around, his gaze moving over the glass walls, the panoramic view of the skyline, the awards, the life that used to be his mirror and now mocked his fall. "This is yours," he said softly, almost to himself. "It's always been mine," I replied. "You just didn't want to see it." He rubbed his hands together like a man trying to warm himself in the cold. They froze, everything: the house, the accounts. Mom's trust. "I have nothing left, Isla. Nothing." The words hung in the air, heavy and thin. "Maybe that's what it takes," I said. "To finally understand what you did to me." He flinched. "I didn't mean to destroy you. Intent doesn't erase the consequence," I said flatly. "You mocked me, called me a failure, told everyone I'd never survive without you. You took credit for my work, Lucas, for years. You erased me and then laughed while I starved." He didn't defend himself. He just sat down, shoulders caving inward, eyes fixed on the floor. "I thought I was protecting the family name," he murmured. "Dad said you were reckless, that you'd ruin everything." I believed him. And now I see he ruined it all himself. I leaned back. "So what do you want from me?" He hesitated. "A chance to make it right." The room fell still. "You can't fix years of damage with an apology," I said. "But if you want redemption, start with the truth. Publicly. Tell them who built the code, who you stole from." He swallowed hard. "That would destroy what's left of my reputation. Then maybe destruction is what you deserve." He stood, the flicker of his old arrogance flashing in his eyes. "You think you're better than us now, because you have shares and stock and your name in Forbes." I didn't blink. "No. I just finally know who I am without needing you to tell me." He stared at me for a long time before nodding once. "You always were the brave one," he said softly. "I just didn't realize it until too late." Then he turned and left. Through the glass, I watched him walk away, swallowed by the reflection of the city. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. 2 weeks later, the second ghost arrived. I was in a board meeting when my assistant handed me a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, meet me at the place where you first learned to fail. No signature. But I didn't need one. The place was obvious, the tiny cafe in Brooklyn where I'd once worked after my family cast me out. The cafe where I'd written the first fragments of the Vantage algorithm between refilling coffee cups. I went alone. The bell over the door jingled the same way it had years ago. The smell of burnt espresso and nostalgia hit me all at once. In the corner booth, my father sat waiting. He looked worse than Lucas, his suit loose, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness, but still carried that trace of authority, brittle and frayed. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," I replied. He gestured to the seat. "Please." I sat more out of curiosity than grace. I wanted to say. He paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily to men like him. "You were right. About everything." The admission landed with the weight of a confession. "I built an empire," he continued, "but I never built a family. I thought I could manage both the same way. That control meant love." He exhaled shakily. "But people aren't assets. They're not stocks to be traded for loyalty." I didn't speak. I just listened because silence was the only thing that didn't wound him. "Why tell me this now?" I finally asked. "Because I saw your foundation," he said quietly. "Because I saw our name doing something good for once. And because I wanted you to know I'm proud of you even if I never deserved to be." For a moment my throat closed. I hadn't realized how much I needed those words until I heard them. "Do you want forgiveness?" I asked. He shook his head. "No. Just for you to keep doing what you're doing. Make the Caswell name mean something again. Something clean." There was a tremor in his voice, a faint echo of the man he might have been if greed hadn't corroded him. He slid an envelope across the table. "This is all I have left. 5% of the remaining Caswell shares. Worth almost nothing now. But maybe one day it'll be more." I looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. "Keep it," I said. "Let it remind you of what you lost." He nodded slowly. "You sound like your mother." "Good," I said softly. "She's the only one who ever told me the truth." When I walked out, snow was falling, slow, quiet flakes catching in the amber streetlight. I stopped at the corner where I used to wait for the bus after late shifts, clutching a notebook filled with sketches of impossible ideas. That girl still lived somewhere inside me. But she wasn't waiting anymore. She was walking forward. A week later, Forbes emailed again. They wanted a follow-up feature, The Family Empire That Ate Itself and the Woman Who Rebuilt It. I declined. Instead, I sent one line back. "This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about reclamation. Because revenge ends. Reclamation doesn't. It keeps growing, branching into something cleaner, braver, more human." That night I stood at my office window, the city below blanketed in snow that glowed like a fresh page. Adam joined me, his reflection merging with mine in the glass. "You did it," he said softly. "No," I said, watching the snowfall. "I survived it." He smiled. "Same thing in the right light." I turned to him, the skyline glittering behind us. "Maybe," I said. "But survival's only the first chapter." He raised an eyebrow. "And the next living," I said simply. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly what that meant. Not building empires out of glass and gold, but growing roots in the ashes. Not in power, not in wealth, but in peace. The first snow after the scandal didn't feel like a season, it felt like a reset. By January, the city had turned white, the air sharp enough to taste. I walked to work most mornings now, wrapped in a gray coat that wasn't designer, sipping coffee from a corner cafe instead of the executive machine that used to define my mornings. For the first time in years, my routine felt like mine. At Vantage, things had finally stabilized. The chaos after the Forbes revelation had faded into rhythm. Contracts were steady. Investors stopped calling daily to check in. Our team expanded to 50 employees, and for the first time when I entered the office, people didn't go quiet, they smiled. But beneath the success, something quieter began to take root. A restlessness I didn't recognize. Priya noticed first. "You're too calm," she said one morning, flipping through quarterly projections. "You've hit every target. Most founders would be celebrating right now." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm not like most founders." She tilted her head. "Or maybe you don't know how to stop fighting." The words lingered long after she left. Because she was right. For so long, I'd been defined by defiance against my family, against their cruelty, against the fear of never being enough. Fighting had become my oxygen, and now in the quiet aftermath of victory breathing felt strange. Silence, I was learning, could be terrifying. That night I walked through the city without purpose. The streets shimmered under street lamps, puddles of melted snow catching reflections of skyscrapers like mirrors to another life. My feet carried me where my thoughts wouldn't admit I wanted to go. Pier 14. It looked smaller than I remembered. The boards creaked underfoot, and the ocean wind bit at my cheeks. I used to come here with Lucas when we were teenagers, sneaking out after midnight to dream about futures we'd never live. Now the pier was empty except for the water whispering secrets to the dark. "You look like you're waiting for something," a voice said behind me. "Ethan." He held 2 steaming cups of coffee, his hair dusted with snow. "Just thinking," I said, "about how everything I used to want feels different now." He handed me a cup. "Different how?" "When I built Vantage, it was about proving them wrong. Every line of code, every late night, I wanted to show them they couldn't break me. But now," I exhaled, watching the steam rise and vanish. "Now I just want to build something that outlasts all of this. Something that matters." He nodded, quiet for a moment. "You know, when I first joined you, I thought you were out of your mind. The secrecy, the fake names, the way you built everything in the shadows." I laughed softly. "You weren't wrong." "But I get it now," he said. "You weren't hiding, you were healing." The wind whipped between us, carrying our words out to sea. "And you stayed anyway," I said. He smiled. "Some people are worth staying for." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was steady. The following week brought an unexpected visitor. My mother. She appeared in the Vantage lobby without warning, no driver, no pearls, just a wool coat and eyes that looked both tired and new. "Isla," she said softly. The sound of my name in her voice startled me. I stood unsure if I should brace or embrace. "May I come in?" she asked. I nodded, leading her to my office. Her gaze moved slowly over the glass walls, the hum of servers, the soft laughter from the open workspace beyond. "This place suits you," she said, running her hand across the polished table. "It's alive." "So are you," I said. Her smile trembled. "I left your father. Sold the house. Sold everything. I'm in Boston now. It's small. It's quiet. It's mine." For a moment I couldn't breathe. "Why now?" "Because watching you rebuild showed me I didn't have to keep living in ruins." Her words cracked something open inside me. "I thought you hated me," I said. "I did," she admitted, "because it was easier than hating myself." She reached across the desk, her hand cold but steady. "You reminded me that courage doesn't die, it just waits." My throat tightened. "I'm proud of you," she said, tears bright in her eyes. "I should have protected you. I didn't. But I see you now." I stood and pulled her into an embrace. She trembled in my arms. "It's strange," she whispered. "Forgiveness feels lighter than guilt." "It always does," I said. The next few weeks passed in a kind of quiet bloom. My mother visited often. Sometimes she'd bring tea and stories about her tiny apartment. Sometimes she'd just sit in the lounge watching the team with quiet admiration, as if she'd found the family she'd always wanted to belong to. In February, the Caswell Foundation launched its first scholarship. 10 young women. 10 stories of resilience. Priya handed me a letter one evening, her smile small but knowing. "Read this one." It was from a girl named Elise, 17, daughter of a waitress from Ohio. "I saw your story, Ms. Caswell. I'm not smart enough for MIT or rich enough for Stanford, but maybe I can be brave enough to try. You made that seem possible." I folded the letter slowly. "That's it," I said. "That's why all of this mattered." Priya grinned. Revenge never looks as good as hope, does it? No, I said, laughing softly. It never did. March came with another letter. This one was from my father. The handwriting was still precise, though the ink trembled slightly. Isla, I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know I'm selling the last of the Caswell assets. The proceeds will go to your foundation. Consider it restitution, not redemption. Redemption is yours now. You built it yourself. Charles Caswell. I read it twice, then tucked it beside Elise's letter in my desk drawer. 2 voices, 2 generations, both admitting what power never could, sometimes destruction is the only path to clarity. That night I went back to Pier 14. The water was calm, black glass rippling under the city lights. I thought of my family, the arrogance, the collapse, the ghosts still learning how to live without walls made of money. Adam joined me, hands deep in his coat pockets. You come here a lot, he said. It's quiet, I replied. He looked at me, his breath visible in the cold. You ever think this is what you were chasing all along? Not revenge, not justice, just quiet. Maybe, I said. But quiet's only worth something when you've earned it. He nodded. Then you've earned it. We stood there until our hands went numb, the city's hum fading behind us. When I finally walked away from the pier, I didn't look back. The snow began again, soft, slow, forgiving, covering everything in white, clean, new, like forgiveness itself. The spring thaw came slowly that year, as if winter didn't want to release its grip on the city. From my office window, I watched it melt day by day, snow softening to gray slush ice breaking apart along the Hudson, the skyline losing its white edges. The world was thawing. But somewhere inside me, something still stayed frozen. Vantage technologies had grown faster than I could process. Our valuation had crossed $1 billion. I said the number once just to hear it out loud, and it still felt like fiction. The press called me the quiet billionaire. I didn't mind the title. Silence, after all, had built me. But success has a way of shining light into places you'd rather keep dark. And light, I was learning, always comes with a price. It started on an ordinary morning. Ms. Caswell, my assistant, said through the intercom, "There's a Mr. Stanton from the Department of Commerce on line 2. Says it's urgent. Government calls were rarely about congratulations." "This is Isla Caswell," I said, picking up. "Ms. Caswell." "Good morning," Stanton began briskly. "We've detected cybersecurity activity linked to your blockchain division. There's a potential breach. Your servers flagged a mirrored transmission at 3:42 a.m. I straightened in my chair. A breach from where an external node traced to an IP address in Switzerland. Encrypted. It's pulling mirrored financial data transaction patterns, not client info. My pulse quickened. "You're saying someone's replicating our system? More like shadowing it," he said. "And here's the part that caught our eye. They're using Caswell Holdings' legacy code." The words dropped like a stone. That code wasn't supposed to exist anymore. I'd dismantled it, burned the archives, erased every fragment when the empire fell. But ghosts, it seemed, don't die easily. Within hours, the office was in controlled chaos. Priya coordinated the tech sweep, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she pulled up mirrored data streams on a wall of screens. Adam handled communications, drafting statements just in case. "Whoever's doing this," Priya said, not looking up, "they're good. They've built a parallel validation system, identical structure, identical flow. On the monitor, I watched data lines ripple like reflections in a lake." "Shut it down," I said. "If we block it now, we'll lose the trace route," she warned. "Then isolate it. Starve it until it breaks." Adam stepped closer. "You think it's Lucas?" I shook my head. "No, he's under investigation. He doesn't have the reach." "Then who?" Only one name made sense. My father. He may have lost his company, but men like him never lose their hunger for control. Power just changes form. That night I drove back to the Caswell estate. The gates hung open, rust creeping along the iron bars. The marble steps were cracked, the fountain frozen mid-collapse. The mansion looked like what it had always been, a monument to ego pretending to be legacy. He was in the study as always. Reading glasses perched low, the fire dead in the grate. "You didn't call ahead," he said without looking up. "I figured you'd prefer the surprise." He set his book down. "You're angry. You're stealing from me." His brow creased. "Excuse me?" "Don't play dumb, Father. There's a mirrored system siphoning our blockchain data. Your old encryption signature is all over it." He rose slowly, his movements slower now, older. "I don't even have access to a laptop. They froze every account I own." "Then who has it?" The silence that followed was an answer in itself. "Who, Father?" He sighed, leaning against the desk. "Margaret Lane." I froze. "Your compliance officer, she was more than that," he said quietly. "When the investigation ended, she left the country. Said she was starting over. I didn't ask where. Margaret Lane. The woman who'd handed me the evidence that destroyed Lucas. The woman who'd whispered professional karma like a curse. Now she was back building her own empire from the bones of mine." "She's rebuilding Caswell," I said. He nodded slowly. "Or something that looks like it." I turned for the door. "Then I'll burn it before it breathes." He called after me. "Isla, don't make my mistake. You can't save your soul by setting fires." I didn't answer. Because sometimes burning is how you purify. The next week was a blur of long nights and cold coffee. We traced the mirrored transmissions across continents, Zurich to Singapore to New York, until the pattern began to form a shape a shell corporation nested inside 3 others, all pointing back to one name: Margaret Lane. "She's building a parallel company," Priya said, scrolling through the data. "Same architecture, same blockchain system. She's calling it Caswell Digital." Adam frowned. "She's weaponizing your design." "No," I said quietly. "She's weaponizing my history. By the 3rd night, we had enough evidence to file injunctions and freeze her assets. But I didn't want paperwork. I wanted a face." It took 3 calls and 1 well-placed threat to arrange a meeting. Margaret agreed to see me in her midtown penthouse, a glass fortress overlooking the city like she owned it. She met me at the door in a tailored charcoal suit, all poise and precision. "Isla," she said warmly, "you look well. Congratulations on your success." "Spare me," I said. "Why are you mirroring my system?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Because your system was built on the foundation I helped create. I was there, remember I signed the contracts. I buried the secrets. You inherited a corpse, Isla. I'm resurrecting it. You're stealing intellectual property. I'm reclaiming what your family abandoned." I stepped closer. "You're rebuilding something rotten and calling it progress. Don't mistake greed for vision." Her gaze hardened. "And don't mistake morality for power." The room crackled. 2 women forged in the same fire, standing on opposite ends of its ashes. "Walk away, Margaret," I said, "before I take everything from you." Her lips curved slightly. "You already did." That night, the adrenaline drained, leaving only exhaustion. Priya found me in my office, surrounded by silence and city light. "The injunctions went through," she said gently. "Her accounts are frozen." "Good." She hesitated. "You don't look relieved." "I'm not. Because it never ends." I met her eyes. "Because I keep going back to make sure it's really over." She smiled sadly. "Maybe that's the problem, you keep digging up the ashes just to see if they still burn." Her words landed softly but cut deep. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd confused peace with vigilance. Maybe light and fire weren't so different after all, both could blind you if you stood too close. I turned back to the window. The last of the snow had melted. The streets below gleamed with rain and possibility. For the first time, I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to rest. Outside, the city pulsed with new beginnings, and as the river thawed and the first buds broke through the soil, I felt something inside me finally give way, the edge softening, the anger loosening, the light finding me instead of the other way around. Spring had come, and with it the first fragile promise of peace. It felt poetic that the year would end exactly where everything had begun at Christmas dinner. My mother insisted on hosting. Not at the old Caswell mansion, which now sat dark and empty like a mausoleum of pride, but in her small brownstone on the Upper East Side. "It's time to make new memories," she'd said on the phone, her voice light, unburdened. I'd almost said no. But something inside me whispered that this table this night was the final act of a story that needed to end where it started. So I said yes. Snow fell in lazy spirals as I climbed her stoop, the city glowing gold beneath streetlights. Inside, the scent of rosemary and orange peel mixed with the low hum of jazz. The laughter drifting from the dining room didn't sound forced, it sounded human. And then I saw him. Lucas. He stood by the fireplace, a glass of wine in hand. The tailored navy suit was familiar, but the man wearing it wasn't. The arrogance in his shoulders had softened, the gleam in his eyes dimmed to something quieter. Regret, maybe. "Isla," he said, setting the glass down. "You came." I did. A ghost of a smile. "Guess there's a first time for everything." My mother slipped between us, her eyes moving anxiously from face to face. "No fighting tonight," she said gently. "Please." "I didn't come to fight," I said. And for once it was true. The table wasn't grand like the ones from our childhood Christmases, but it was warm. My mother had set it with care, mismatched plates, real candles, napkins folded into tiny stars. Adam arrived a few minutes later, snow clinging to his coat, his grin effortless as always. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Your business partner?" Adam smirked. "Something like that." I shot him a look. He only grinned wider. The meal began politely. The kind of small talk that holds its breath, weather, politics, the new subway delays. My mother served turkey and cranberry sauce, and for the first time in years, the air wasn't heavy with judgment. Until Lucas spoke. So he said, swirling his wine, "I heard about your little empire. Forbes couldn't stop talking about you this year." My mother stiffened. "Lucas," he waved her off. "It's impressive, really. You've become, what was it, the youngest self-made tech billionaire in America? Quite the glow-up for a waitress." The room frozen. The silverware still stood. The soft jazz seemed to vanish into silence. For a moment I thought I might still feel that sting, the one I'd carried for years. But I didn't. I smiled. "Still keeping tabs on me?" I asked lightly. "You used to mock me for being obsessed with work. Funny how that works both ways." He blinked, thrown off. "I just call things like I see them." "Then maybe it's time you start seeing things clearly," I said. "Because that waitress owned 30% of Caswell Holdings shares before you learned how to spell ledger." Before he could reply, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his eyebrows shot up. "Oh," he said with a laugh, "you're going to love this." He turned the screen toward Lucas. The headline glowed bright on Forbes. "Youngest tech billionaire expands vantage into green tech, buys Caswell family estate for charitable foundation headquarters." Lucas's smirk fell apart. "You what?" I met his stare calmly. "I bought the mansion last week. It'll become the Caswell STEM initiative. Scholarships, labs, housing for students who can't afford tuition." His hand shook around his glass. You can't." "Oh, I can," I said softly. And I did. The home that once made me feel small will now build futures. My mother covered her mouth, tears gathering in her eyes. "Isla," she whispered. "That's beautiful." Adam leaned in, voice low but teasing. "You should have seen her at the auction. The lawyers practically begged her to take it." I gave him a look. He only winked. Across the table, Lucas sat still, pale, silent. Then unexpectedly my mother laughed, a soft musical sound I hadn't heard in years. "Oh, Lucas," she said gently, shaking her head. "You mocked her for being a waitress and she just bought your childhood." His eyes snapped toward her. "You think this is funny?" I think she said, voice steady. "It's justice." After dinner the house fell quiet, except for the soft crackle of the fireplace. Lucas caught me by the door as I slipped on my coat. His face was tight, his voice low. "You didn't have to humiliate me like that." I studied him for a moment. "You humiliated me for years, Lucas, At birthdays, at boardrooms, at every Christmas table we ever sat at. I'm done apologizing for thriving. He looked away. Dad always said I was the one meant to inherit everything, that you didn't have the temperament. Dad built an empire on fear, I said. I built one on purpose. That's the difference. His voice cracked. So this is it, you win. This isn't about winning, I said quietly. You can't win what I've built. It's not made of money or shares or stock. It's made of choice. I chose peace. You chose pride. He didn't argue. He just nodded, a flicker of something like sorrow crossing his face. Maybe pride was all I ever had. Then he turned and walked into the snow, his figure fading into the white. Inside, my mother wrapped her arms around me. You did what I never could, she whispered. Adam lingered near the window, watching the snowfall. So he said, smiling, "How does it feel to finally own Christmas?" I laughed softly. "It feels like letting go." He chuckled. "You've always been better at redemption than revenge. Maybe they're the same thing," I said. "Maybe forgiveness is just payback in its highest form." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. "Then consider me impressed." His hand lingered for a heartbeat too long. I turned back toward the dining room. My mother hummed quietly as she cleared the plates, the light catching the gold edges of her laughter. The air smelled of cinnamon and warmth. For the first time since that awful dinner years ago, Christmas didn't feel like a performance. It felt like peace. Later, as I stepped outside, the street lay blanketed in snow. The city hummed, faintly alive, but softened, every sound absorbed by white. I looked up at the night sky, the same one that had watched me walk away years ago, humiliated and broken. Now it watched me return. And in the quiet under the falling snow, I whispered the words that had once felt impossible. Thank you. Not to anyone, not to anything. Just to the journey itself. It started as a joke in the office, the 5-minute rule. Adam had said it one morning after a meeting that dragged past common sense. If it won't matter in 5 years, he'd said, tapping the whiteboard with his pen, don't waste more than 5 minutes worrying about it. Everyone laughed. But the words stayed with me long after the laughter faded. Because 5 minutes had once changed everything. 5 minutes at that Christmas dinner when Lucas mocked me. 5 minutes before the laughter curdled into silence. 5 minutes before I learned that humiliation could turn to fuel and that dignity, when held long enough, becomes fire. Now 5 minutes was more than a rule. It was a compass. A year had passed since that night. The Caswell mansion, once a symbol of greed and exclusion, stood reborn as the Caswell Foundation for Innovation. The marble floors were gone, replaced by polished concrete. The chandeliers by skylights. The family portraits by murals painted by the first scholarship students, girls from towns like the one I'd escaped, their faces bright with something I hadn't known at their age: possibility. On opening day, the courtyard filled with cameras and press badges. The morning light gleamed off the new sign, the same name that had once been my shame, now reclaimed in bronze. My mother stood beside me, proud but quiet, her gloved hand tucked around mine. Adam lingered just behind the podium, pretending to check notes, but watching me instead. A Forbes reporter, the same one who'd written the first story that changed everything, raised her hand. "What does success mean to you now, Ms. Caswell?" I looked back at the girls behind me. 10 scholarship recipients, 10 different beginnings. Then at the house that had once been a prison, now a promise. "Success," I said slowly, "is building a world where nobody has to beg to belong." The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in the blur I caught Adam's smile, that quiet kind of pride that doesn't need to be said aloud. That night, after the reporters had gone and the foundation hall had emptied, I wandered the corridors alone. My heels clicked against the smooth floor, the sound soft, rhythmic, almost meditative. In my father's old study, the mahogany desk still stood. We'd kept it not as an altar, but as a warning. I traced my hand along its edge, feeling the grooves and scratches, ghosts of decisions long past. He'd died 6 months earlier, peacefully, the doctor said. His final letter had arrived the next day. "Don't let the ghosts keep you company, Isla. Let the living ones in." It was the closest thing to an apology he ever gave me. And somehow, it was enough. Outside, the night was calm. The new fountain shimmered beneath the moon water, whispering against stone. The building glowed behind me not with opulence, but with purpose. Adam appeared beside me, his coat collar turned up against the chill. "You did it," he said quietly. I shook my head. "We did." He smiled. "You've come a long way from that waitress in the red apron," I laughed. "Don't remind me. I still smell espresso when I'm stressed." He reached into his pocket and handed me something small and cold, a key. I frowned. "What's this?" "The cafe on Bleecker Street," he said. "You told me once you wanted to buy it back someday. Consider it done." I blinked. "You're joking." "Nope. It's closing next month. I figured the woman who built an empire out of caffeine should probably own the place that started it all." I stared at him. "You're ridiculous." "I'm practical," he said, his grin lopsided. "You've mastered revenge, redemption, and rebuilding. Now it's time for something simpler. Like coffee, like peace." I turned the key in my hand. "Maybe I'll rename it." He raised an eyebrow. To what I smiled. 5 minutes. The name lingered between us, quiet and perfect. 5 minutes to breathe, to reflect, to forgive, to move on. A few weeks later, I reopened the cafe under that name. 5 minutes. The letters gleamed above the door in gold. The walls were lined with framed photos of our scholarship recipients, the real legacy of the Caswell name. For every latte sold, $1 went to fund another seat in the program. And sometimes, when I worked behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back, customers would glance twice and whisper, "Is that her?" I never corrected them. Because in those moments I wasn't the billionaire. I was just Isla, the woman who'd learned that humility doesn't erase power. It refines it. That December, I hosted my own Christmas dinner. Nothing extravagant, just my team, our scholars, and my mother, who laughed more freely than I'd ever seen. The table was small, the food simple. But the joy felt boundless. Priya raised her glass. "To the woman who proved karma doesn't need to shout to be heard." Adam added, smiling, "To the woman who made 5 minutes worth a lifetime." Laughter filled the room. I looked around the table, the family I'd chosen, the people who'd stood beside me through every storm, and realized something. Revenge had long since faded from this story. What remained was legacy. Not built on power or wealth or fear, but on dignity. After everyone left, I stepped outside. Snow fell in slow, steady flakes, the air alive with quiet. Across the street, through the cafe window, the open sign glowed faintly. A few students sat inside coding, sketching, laughing. And that's when it hit me. The circle was complete. The waitress had become the woman who owned the building. The girl who'd been mocked had built something that outlasted the mockery. The family that fractured under pride had found its redemption in purpose. I looked up at the night sky, the same sky that had witnessed my humiliation, my exile, my return. And I whispered a thank you, not to the past, but to the journey, for the humiliation that became strength, for the isolation that became the purpose, for the 5 minutes that remade my life. The next morning, Forbes ran one final feature, a photo of me standing in front of the cafe, coffee in hand, smiling. The 5-minute billionaire. How Isla Caswell turned humiliation into hope. I laughed when I saw it, not at the headline, but because it didn't define me anymore. I had already written my own ending. And it wasn't revenge. It was peace. If someone's ever underestimated you, if they've laughed at your dreams or told you that you'd never belong, remember this. 5 minutes can break you, or 5 minutes can remake you. It's your choice which story you tell. And if this story reminded you that dignity is the quietest form of power, like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their time is coming. Because sometimes all it takes